Hi, and welcome to Together, the podcast where we dive into conscious partnership, conscious parenting, and we really dance the line of the we space, the together space. And in today's topic, we are going to be exploring imprinting. Courtney and I just came off of last weekend speaking at an event called The New Human, and Charles Eisenstein were there. Zach Bush was there. Andrea Gurr was there. It's just amazing speakers. And it was put on by Dr. Kevin Preston. And it was such a success. And the piece that Courtney and I spoke to was sacred relationship. And we really brought in this elements in Courtney's speech. She also spoke alone. And on her speech, she really danced this area of imprinting. And a lot of the questions that have come from that event since then is like, that was really profound, but can you explain imprinting more? So we are going to go even deeper the whole episode today. We are going to uncover all the terrain of imprinting, and we're going to start off with, what is imprinting?
Yeah, and just to paint a little picture for you, what happened was a little pattern arose between Mike and I during the New Human, and we were just real about it. We shared with the crowd, and Mike was able to acknowledge the part he had played, and I was able to take responsibility of, oh, you joined my imprint.
Which was pretty funny when we named it, because
Yeah.
it was something for orientation, I was emceeing the event. And so it was in the intro of when I introed Courtney is when this played out. And then the next day we spoke and we used that as an example to highlight imprinting.
Mm-hmm.
And when Courtney owned, and that's my imprint, there was gasps in the audience. They're like, because what Courtney or what you were inviting here was radical self-responsibility. And why don't you go a little deeper on that?
Yeah. Okay, so imprinting. So when we come into form, come into a body, when our soul comes into a body, we meet a field, a matrix, an energetic matrix that's made up of the ancestral information. So all of the ancestral patterns and stories that live both within the DNA, but also within our energy field. And so there's something called the morphogenic field. And the morphogenic field is so fascinating. It's different than the genetic information. It's literally an energy that's held in the spaces in between, in the energy field of life, that's like a template of how something unfolds. So an example is they've looked at plants and found, that inside of them, the fact that this particular plant always grows in this way isn't actually written into its DNA or into the genetics of that plant, into the information of that plant. And so this is where they started to discover there's actually information in the field around that's in the energy field of the plant. It's like a template of, this is how this plant grows, or this is how this animal is, or this is how this person is. So we're born into both genetic information and then also this energy field that informs. It's like we come into a field that says, this is how this human is going to grow. This is how they're going to experience life. This is what relationship is going to look like. And it's supportive because it helps us come in and we don't have to know everything. We evolve into something that's giving us a template of how to be. And then in our journey, we meet experiences when we're in the womb, when we're born, how we're raised, especially in the first 3 years of life. That's where most of our imprints and patterns are already laid, is during that time. So this is almost like a map of information that now is the themes and stories that we're going to journey through our life. So we'll have these different imprints or patterns that if we stay unconscious, will just play out over and over and over and over and over in different ways. And we'll all have different themes, and we'll all have different patterns, and lots of them will be ancestral. And then we'll also have ones that are unique to us based on our conception story, our birth story, our time in the womb, and astrological aspects too, which, that's the gene keys, right? Looks at the imprints that are written even in the astrological field, because all of that is an imprinting too. So we basically come into this matrix of imprints that then we're walking around with, that then is informing the field around us of, this is who this person is, and this is how the field around us is going to relate with us. This is how people are going to relate with us. This is how animals are going to relate with us. This is how the earth is going to relate with us. And we have this almost like resonance sonar that we're sending out all the time that's drawing in certain experiences and letting the field know how we are going to be treated. And so if we stay unconscious, those imprints will just play out, and we'll just journey it over and over and over. And we'll have lots of experiences with it. And what this is referred to as is fate. It's our fate. Our imprinting is our fate. If we just journey the imprinting, that becomes our fate. There's nothing we can do about it. It's just what happens. Now, our destiny is what happens when we start to become conscious of the imprinting of that information, and we start to consciously work with it and heal it and learn in it. That's what brings us into destiny. It's like through rewriting it, through co-creating with our imprints, through getting to know it and healing it, we get catapulted into our destiny. And many of us are walking around and have no idea that we're walking around with imprints. And what I notice, and Mike and I were talking about, is many people are aware they have patterns, but they don't realize how big the imprinting field is, and that most of it was all there before you were even 3. And most of us don't realize that a lot of it is ancestral. A lot of it is even, cultural, like we also have an imprinting in our field. If you're living in Canada, about being Canadian, about being white or being Indigenous, or there's all these layers of imprinting that shape how we relate. So when we come into contact with another person, there's 2 huge fields of imprinting and information that unconsciously we're attuning to. Not consciously, but unconsciously. And then again, if we continue to relate in an unconscious way, those imprints will just play out. And this is where we talk about attracting a partner who ends up perfectly matching your patterns, But the alternative, and this is what Mike and I are so passionate about, is sacred relationship, where we want to be allies in getting to know each other's energetic matrix of imprints, so that we can actually start to unwind them, get to know them, and bring each other into our destiny.
Yeah. And consciously choose the story that wants to be written. Because when it comes to the imprinting, if we go through this avenue of just unconsciously living, then the patterns play out. And what I found is generally in like the victim consciousness place. It's like the shadow expression of it, of, oh, here's that pattern again, playing out again and again. And I'd say, a simple way of grasping the imprinting, I feel like this is a simple base to understand, is a lot of people understand, if they haven't done the gene keys, if they haven't gone deep in their astrology, most people have heard of the zodiacs. And so if we think of these zodiac signs, it's this imprinting of where all the planets aligned. We entered into this world, and there's this energy that represents that time or that year. And I'd say for myself, year of the ox, like that really resonates on how my energy is. I'm like quite stable. I can be stubborn. I can, there's a strong imprinting that matches where, we go back thousands and thousands of years, the Chinese brought in animals to represent what the behaviors are that come from that energy. And then when we go in deeper into the astrology, we go into Aries or Scorpio, all these things, there's these qualities that come from that. So what Courtney and I are really passionate about is like we love astrology and gene keys. You know, when we look at the gene keys, each gene key really is an imprint. It's imprinted information that highlights here, like this is the shadow expression of it. Here's the gift of it. And then what you're using here is destiny, or, you know, in gene keys, it's Sitic frequency. It's this essence. It's like the most liberated potential of this imprint. And I really love exploring, okay, great. How does this show up in relationship? What are the imprints from, you know, we take these big patterns, these big imprints from the astrological piece. And then we also take in, great, we were born into a certain environment, the pressures of what was mom feeling, what was mom experiencing while developing you as an embryo and into a body. What was going on? Were mom and dad close, or were they fighting lots? Was mom doing drugs? Like all these ingredients create an imprint. And then, like Courtney's expressing, a lot of the patterns and these imprints that play out in our life as adults are just repeated cycles of really what happened in those like 0 to 3 years. So much of how we experience our adult life, you know, there's been so many studies on this. 95% of our subconscious mind is formed in those first 3 years of life. And so it's so beneficial and helpful to use this relational space, like Courtney, you know, you and I, we use our relationship, we use this, what we call this third entity, the soul of our relationship, to hold us while we get to know our imprinting more intimately, and then help each other rewrite it in the way that we want to. Like you said, going into our destiny, like how do we emerge and arrive and move forward into destiny and break the patterns and the cycles that don't feel so helpful or aren't enjoyable anymore, or aren't empowering. So I'm curious about going into, you know, here's this foundation of what an imprint is, how that shows up in our relationship, what some examples are for us, and then how we work with it so that the people listening can really go deeper with it.
Yeah, I'd love to map out one of my imprints just to give you a vision of this. And I talked a little bit about this at the New Human, but I'm going to go into it more. So I'll begin at the place of when my mom was pregnant with me. She had had several miscarriages, and her and my dad really wanted to have children. And they were starting to think maybe they couldn't. They were even looking into adoption. And then she got pregnant with me. And so there was a really strong energy in the field of her being worried that I would die or that there'd be something wrong. And so the imprint, just to describe this, is I was really healthy, vibrant being. There wasn't anything from the inside that was wrong, but then there was this message from the outside that there's something wrong. Is there something wrong? There's something wrong. And, you know, and she could die. And so the experience in my body was, I feel fine, but I'm getting this message from the outside that something's wrong, that there's something wrong with me. So that's the imprint. And then, of course, I have journeyed that imprint in a million different ways over and over and over and over and over. Where one of the ways that this has shown up for me a lot is where when I would express my feelings, and so I had anxious attachment as well. This is something to know. So with anxious attachment, what that looks like is your caregivers are able to meet you some of the time in an attuned way, but then not others. And often they are preoccupied with their own material, and so they're not able to meet you in a receiving way or to attune to, oh, it's so healthy that Courtney's needing that or feeling upset. And so what that looked like was when I would have a need, when I would reach out and say, oh, I'm feeling scared about this, or, oh, I'm, having this feeling, I would be met with this idea or this perception, here's the imprint again, that there was something wrong with me. So instead of seeing the health, that I'm feeling something real, I'm having an intuition about something, there's a health in me, being met with, oh, there's something wrong with Courtney. Oh, there's something wrong with Courtney that needs fixing. And so I got met with this over and over and over. And just to back up a little bit, to give you an even bigger perception, is I have unwound this a lot in my system. And my grandfather, on my father's side, he had really bad anxiety. He actually ended up in a mental institution in the 50s and getting electric shock. And so there's a whole line, and above him, there's lots of suicides. And if you just think of that, right? My grandfather, how I understand it as I've unwound it, is he was starting to feel his feelings. He was starting to unthaw from trauma, and he was starting to feel things as he was becoming a father. And when his feelings started to come out, it freaked everyone out. You know, it's like, oh, you have anxiety. Instead of seeing it as a healing movement, you have anxiety. We got to put you in the hospital. We're going to electric shock you. So here's the really big imprint of, oh, you have feelings, you have needs coming up. There's something wrong with you. So we're going to do something to shut that down. And of course, people aren't intending that. It's all unconscious. And we could go back even further, because more interesting is they've been done lots of work on understanding that a lot of the imprinting that's happening in hospitals and psychiatric care comes from war. Super fascinating stuff. So there's all these layers of imprinting. So this is something I've lived in my life over and over. It played out for me in school. Like, I have a feeling something comes up for me. I'm upset about something. And instead of there being a clear reception of, oh, Courtney's having a feeling, she's needing support, so it's, oh, something's wrong with Courtney, we need to fix that. And it has been a huge one for me. And then what is really trippy, I just want to name this about imprinting, is it's so interesting being with Mike, because he has a different imprint where when he has a feeling, people really hear him and like, oh, like, oh, how can we support him? And he'll go into that a bit. But just to explain how imprints work is, I could be sitting with Mike and I could share something, and it's not so much anymore, but I've experienced this, where I share something that I'm feeling or intuition, and people will come in and minimize, shut it down, be like, oh, everything's fine, Courtney, everything's fine. And then Mike will be sitting right beside me and he'll share something and people will be like, oh, that's so insightful, Mike. Wow. And this is how strong imprints are, is it doesn't mean that the other people aren't capable of attuning or meeting, but my field is walking around saying, hey, when I have an uncomfortable feeling, when I'm feeling stressed about something, it's because there's something wrong with me. And so please mirror back to me how there's something wrong with me and I need fixing. And make sure to minimize what it is I'm feeling. And so people won't even mean to, but they'll play it out. It's played out over and over. And a very common thing that will happen for me is that when I have an intuition about something, instead of being affirmed in it, people, it even played out when I was giving birth, where there was a perception, even though inside I was feeling so strong and so capable and Mike could feel that, there was an outside perception that there was something wrong with me and I needed fixing and I wasn't doing well, which wasn't accurate.
And that things had to be pushed along and they had to go faster. And
yeah, there's something
it was
to
a
fix.
strong one. And I want to speak to that one because it was, when we were in that birth field, to describe imprinting, this is what to track for, is notice like the energy, the sensations, some of the thoughts that are happening. What is your body doing in response to the person you're relating with? Start being curious. Is that how I feel when I'm with other people? Like, what's different? And start to track, because it's the key about the imprinting is to get to know it, is be aware. Bringing in mindful awareness is the thing that helps these imprints, because me knowing Courtney's imprint, and we're going to go into this deeper later on in the episode, but Courtney had done lots of layers of work to understand her imprint, so she could inform me about it. So before we went into Cedar's birth and that birth field, I knew that what happens inside of my body and my nervous system in relationship to Courtney is when she has really big feelings, my body, what it does is, and it still happens, I have to track it, is my body can go, oh God, this is overwhelming, push it away, minimize it, make it that, oh, no, you're fine. It's okay. But it's because there's so much discomfort in my own body that I want it to stop. So it's like, yeah, no, you're good. Everything's fine. And that played out like that was starting to play out in the birth field. In my whole role for that entire birth field was knowing, okay, we're going into the birth field. This is where it gets even, the imprints get stronger. And so my role that whole time was leaning into this phrase. I'm just going to continue. My whole role is just to reassure Courtney in her own assurance, self-assurance, like that she's got this. She's so capable, which she is. And just because feelings come up, or if she feels a little bit of fear, that doesn't mean she's not capable.
Yes, that's the new information for my field.
It's not that she's not capable. It means she's feeling her feelings. And if she can be met in her, like if you can be met in your feelings, and I watch it time and time again, if you can be met there and given reassurance or have co-regulation or a hug or something relational, well, then you move through it. And then this huge wave of empowerment comes through.
Mm-hmm.
So in that birth field, oh my goodness, there's so many times where I would have to just look into Courtney's eyes and just be like, you've got this. You are so capable. You are so strong. You've got this. You're doing great. And that's like the new information moving and piercing through the imprint that could be expressing, oh no, something's wrong, or, oh, I don't think you've got it, because there was a strong kind of energy there of, oh, yeah, you've got to do more, or
And again, it was exactly the imprint from the womb for me, because the imprint is, I feel great, I feel strong, I feel confident in myself, but then the outside world starts to perceive that there's something wrong, there's something that needs fixing, that I'm not capable. And it was so helpful for me to have Mike there and knowing my imprint, because here's the thing, there's no shame on the other people that were there, because imprints are very strong. You have to know someone really well to get to know their imprints. Otherwise, you just will play it out. So there's a way that was inevitable for me, that I would meet my imprint there. It's a bit of like, this is inevitable. I'm going to meet this imprint. But what can be different this time?
Can I add to that? Because this is what I've found helpful about that is what you're describing there is, if it is, it's inevitable that it's going to play out. The key going back to it is awareness. Like when the awareness is there, then it can be like, oh, this is what I'm feeling, and choose something different. But what I've noticed is if I'm not aware of what imprint's there, I'll actually go into defending what I'm feeling, justifying, deflecting, to almost advocate for the imprint.
Yes.
It's like, instead of advocating for you as the person, it's like advocating for, this is real. Like, this is what I'm feeling. Look at all this evidence, but that's the imprint.
Mm-hmm. I'd love for you to share now an example of your imprint.
Yeah, so
we're just mapping out so that you guys can kind of get a feeling of what imprints can look like. And as you're listening, just think about what are some imprints you maybe have.
Yeah, so a strong imprint that I have is people really want to take care of me, which I'm grateful for. And it's also led to a lot of enabling or inundation, where it's not helpful. It actually prevents me stepping into my more empowered self, or me figuring things out on my own, or me actually being emotionally met. Where this imprint comes from is, I was separated from my mother day one of being born, and my grandma raised me for the first year, but she got diagnosed with terminal cancer. She had to find another family for me. So in that first year of my life, once my grandma knew that she needed to find another family for me, there was a lot of focus and attention on me. So I was this cute little, blonde, curly haired, blue eyed baby going to church. And there was a lot of conversation. It was talked about at the masses, so that there was, more awareness, like that this little baby needs a family. And so what this led to is like, I can feel it in my body, like people coming up to like the baby carriage and like looking in and, oh, he's so cute, and talking. I could even feel people like get home talking about me and, oh, that poor little guy. I hope he, oh, that's so sad that that's happening. And, oh, I can feel it. Like there's so much nurture and care, and almost, oh, poor little guy, that poor guy. And this, I eventually did, the family they ended up growing up with, adopted into this family. And what I'd say is, in this imprint, what it's kind of created is lots of people will swoop in to want to help me or solve things or caretake me. So if I go into more vulnerable feelings, I notice this strongly. If I go into, hey, I just need to grieve, or I need to feel some sadness, people come in and like want to fix it, want to give me advice, give me solutions. I'm like, oh, I need you to, what the new story for me is, and what I have to advocate for, knowing that this is my imprint, is I actually have to communicate, hey, I need you to back up a little bit. I don't need you to fix anything for me. I don't need you to solve anything. Being with me would be great. Giving me a hug, loving me. Yeah, that would be great.
Mm-hmm.
But don't try to come and fix me. Or another way that this has shown up is, I'd say, unconsciously people seeing me as weak and seeing me as little. But then what that's done for me, I've worked out of this imprint a lot. But in my 20s, what it did is I wanted to isolate, to get away from that projection that was happening of like, oh, Mike, oh, like almost this energy of just me walking into a space is like, oh, I'm like, what? I feel pretty good. I feel strong. I can even see way I compensated as I hit the gym every day. I had like 19-inch arms in my 20s, like worked out every day, super strong. It was almost like to try to push against the imprint of like, I'm not weak. I'm strong. I'm capable. And yeah, that's a bit of my imprint and how it shows up, is people really wanting to caretake and fix, or not getting an accurate mirror reflection of what my gifts are, how capable I am. I have to, yeah.
Can I share what it's like from the outside? So what'll happen is Mike will be in a space and he'll start to feel like, we remember when we first were together and I was introducing you to new people, and it played out in like huge ways. You'd come into a space and you'd just have a feeling or something. And suddenly everybody we were with was like circling around Mike to hold space for him. And so we're at like a social gathering and all of a sudden everyone's circling around Mike, and Mike's like, but then what would start to happen is it wasn't aligned. It wasn't appropriate. So suddenly now Mike's feeling all his feelings, but people keep holding space, and now it's not really contained and it's not safe, and they're like, oh, poor Mike. And like that, remember when that started happening? And I've watched you have to figure out how to have a boundary when all that energy comes rushing in to try to like hold you, and you be like, I got myself, I'm here, like I'm gonna share a little bit, back up. Don't rush in to hold me, because it would really like disempower you. It would look like, it would look loving, but there was a disempowerment in it.
Well, it'd stifle my own experience of me moving through whatever it is that I was moving through. And then it would make me believe I'm weak, or make me feel weak, because I'm not actually able to complete what it is that I'm moving through. That is, yeah, it's okay. It's tender. So a sentence I find myself saying a lot is, I'm good. I've got myself. I'm just to orient. So this is how I work with this imprint, just to orient everyone listening. How I work with this imprint is, if there's new people in my world, if I go to spaces like Men's Circle where I'm going to go vulnerable and I'm going to go into feelings, I orient everyone saying, I'm good. I've got myself. I'm about to dip into a part of me that's feeling the human part that's struggling or that feels tender. I don't need fixing. Like, I'm okay. I've got myself, and I'm going to go in, and then I'll go in and I'll have a cry, and I'll experience everyone's face like, and like that. It's like my imagining is that it's really uncomfortable and they want to come in and fix it. It's like, and then I'll come out of it and I'm like, and I'm feeling this, and oh my God, I'm so grateful for that. And I love my life. And they're like, oh God, whoa. But then I get to have my completion. So what I notice when people don't swoop in to caretake, the new imprint is I get to have my completion, and then I get to feel really empowered of, whoa, I dipped into that part of me. I went into that really tender place, and I came out, and all of a sudden the energy all liberated organically because I was heard, I was felt, I was seen without being caretaken. And then that part matures, and then I get to be an adult holding it. And then that feels really good.
Can I share 2 layers of what it's like to relate with the imprint? So I
Sure.
want to give an example. I didn't go into this, but I could see it was there. Is a version of what this could look like for me as the partner is, every time I'm out in public with Mike, it all becomes about Mike. Like, this is an example, right? If it just played out unconsciously, it all becomes about Mike and, Mike this and Mike that, and everyone's just around Mike. That could be a version, right? And blaming you for it, or and going into that instead of the curiosity. And I remember being like, what is this imprint? you know what can I remember at the beginning, I started having a boundary when that would start to happen, is I would say, this doesn't feel appropriate right now, actually. Remember, I started to be an ally with you, and being like, I think we need to shift the energy. And I started to advocate. Mike's so capable, he gets so much support. Like, I started to become an advocate for you in the field, and another layer of boundary.
Which was just the name was so helpful, because the thing that these imprints need are accurate mirror and reflection.
mhm.
And you were such an ally for that, because when you started to do that, I was like, yeah, I actually am very capable.
Yeah.
And yeah, actually, everyone start back up.
Yeah.
This isn't helpful. This actually makes me feel more insecure and inadequate. Like, it might feel good in the moment, but then I notice almost every time after I'd start feeling shame, and why did that
You'd kind of start to
happen?
fall apart, because you'd be like, wow. Well, it's like if everywhere you go, everyone's acting like everyone has to stop and hold you.
Such a
You're gonna start to be like, oh my God, like, I'm really, there's something wrong with me. So but it would have been really easy for me to feed that, right? And go into that, and, oh, we got to make more and more space. And instead, I actually started to embody, and I remember it making some people uncomfortable, because I would actually back up, and I'd be like, oh, we're not doing that.
What made me uncomfortable too. That's the funny thing of where we can also unconsciously want the imprint to keep
Yes.
going, because there's an element of it that feels good, but overall, overarching, it doesn't feel good. So I'm so grateful that you were able to interject and start to name it and bring in the discomfort, because the discomfort created an appropriate mirror of how to respond and bring in. I notice when that would happen and I'd feel uncomfortable, I'd start to then reflect, what's happening? Oh, wait a minute. How did this just start to happen, and what is going on? Oh, I don't want that much focus or attention. I mean, this actually doesn't feel good. Oh God, I actually am glad she did that. And then there gets to be a completion in that.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've really learned, when that starts to happen, to really talk about how capable you are, and I embody an energy of confidence in you. And yeah. And so and then one other layer quickly before we explain how this shows up in kids, because I think it's important, is so he has that layer of the imprint, but then in another layer, because he didn't have his mom as his primary attachment, it can be actually really hard to move towards Mike. So, he loves touch, he loves physical affection. And I remember this one time, this is an epitome, I feel like, of what is in your field, is I wanted to bring you a picnic for work, and and then come and like rub your body and show you how much I cared about you. Super simple. I can totally do that. It was like moving through, like,
Molasses.
molasses to make that food for you. And the thoughts that were in my head are like, oh, like, this is exhausting. This is so hard. It's so hard to show up for him. Oh, like, I'm working so hard to show up for him. It was this kind of like, and I just kept noticing, wow, this, and I found that almost sometimes to move towards you and offer something very simple can feel hard. Like I have to work so hard. And how I understand this is just because you didn't have that primary attachment. You didn't have the primary. So you have this energy of others rushing in to try to fix something, but then that primary attachment of that close, intimate contact and care was disrupted. And I have noticed, and then this will dovetail into me sharing about Cedar, what I've noticed show up for him is I have to work really hard to create a new template in your field of a primary person staying and being there and moving through and offering that. Like the field almost wants to, I'm the mother, and so I'm distancing, I'm leaving. I don't want to offer you care. I can't offer you care. It's too hard. That's the imprint.
Yeah. And just to make sense of that just a little bit more, is the family ended up being adopted into. My mom didn't offer a lot of, and I'm not saying this is the forever truth, but what feels true in my body, I have not very little recollection or memory of my mom holding me, cuddling me, offering over touch, nurturing reassurance. But there was lots of other people connecting with me. Like my older sister connected me with me a lot. My dad connected with me a lot until I was 5, until my grandma died. And so it was really confusing that my mom wasn't really the one who was in the right role, the one nurturing and giving me all of that. So part of the imprint that played out is I wouldn't even reach out to a primary because I didn't know where there was a primary. And then also not wanting to feel that part, the wisdom, the health in me that doesn't want to be perceived as weak, I would isolate a lot. So I'd spend a lot of time on my own. So in my imprinting, the field sends this message that Courtney's expressed lots, where this, where you've named like this field is like back up. Even though there's a part of me that's like, I want you to come in, give me a hug, offer touch. But there's another part of the field that's saying, I don't need you, leave me alone.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is, and so I want you to understand, if I didn't understand that as an imprint and be curious, it would be very easy for me to say things like, and believe things like, Mike is a lot of work. It's really hard to support him. I noted, like, even too, like, there could even be a story because my body wants to move away. I could tell myself a story. There's something about you that I don't feel good about and that I want to move away from because that's what it feels like in my body. But of course, I know what it's like to love you, and I know what it's like to love people, and I know that it's different. It's not, and that's where the curiosity. But I want to even name, so this is the power of imprints. So then here I am. We have a child, we have a son. And I'm not going to go too much into his experience. I'm going to speak more of my own because it's important to value his privacy. But here I have a son. I gave birth to him. I breastfed him. I've been with him almost every day of his life. I've been a super devoted mama. We have a secure bond. And I grew up with a mom where my mom was a stay-at-home mom. I was almost always with my mom, except for going to school. And if anything, in my imprinting, it would be more, I was only with my mom and I didn't have anybody else come in to care for me. I didn't have the experience of having other people in my field who tended me. It was my mom. And so imagine my surprise when I'm a mom and there keeps being this energy that's playing out. And at first I couldn't figure out what it was. It was this feeling I'd be with my son, but it would feel like the field was like creating confusion about who I was. Like, and almost like I couldn't sit in the seat of mother. So I'd literally be with Cedar. We've been together all day. And yet I feel really far away from him and like something's pushing me away as his mom. And then I've also noticed this way. This is when I started to figure out it was an imprint where so many people want to help take care of Cedar. People reaching out, I'd love to watch Cedar. I'd love to watch Cedar. I'd love to, and almost like more and more people wanting to come in and take care of Cedar. So and pushing me out more and more and more. It was so baffling to me because I'm so committed to being a mom. I want to be a mom. I want to be with Cedar. I want to have some childcare a little bit for work. but just this perplexity, and then realizing, oh, this is him embodying the adoption field. So now here's Cedar, who that's not what he's experienced at all. And yet the field wants to play out the imprint from Mike's generational line.
Because it's carried in, it's carried in his DNA.
Yes.
And another way, if I can, where I've witnessed it, is especially in the beginning, where the three of us show up to a space, and there would be this consistent pattern where another woman would come in or someone would come in and take Cedar and then turn away from Courtney. And even if Cedar wanted to go back to Courtney, to you, that person would want to take him away from you.
Yeah, which of course I didn't let happen.
Yeah.
But to understand, if I wasn't being aware, the story I would be telling myself is, wow, Cedar seems to be the kind of soul that many people want to take care of him. And wow, as a mom, I can actually be really spacious with Cedar. Like if I just let the pattern play out. And wow, I'm able to have a lot of time to myself and because there's so much support in the field. But what I've had to do is notice the imprint and keep choosing something different. And in a way, what I'm doing then is not only am I working with that field, but I'm actually helping. This is where we become allies in each other's generational line. And this is how I see it is Mike ended up choosing someone who in my lineage, it's like moms who are like, it's like you're only with your mom. So I have such a different imprint that then I can really notice this imprint and I can bring something new. I know the devotion of mother in my being, in my bones. And so then my field is bringing that medicine. And so now I'm devoting, and I'm rewriting the imprint. I'm choosing to rewrite the imprint. But it could be very easy where I could just play out the imprint. I watch it all the time. I have to say no, I'm the mother. I want to be with Cedar most of the time and then have people come in and support a little bit. I have to keep asserting it. The field wants to recreate the imprint.
Oh yeah, it's so palpable. It's so true. In being Courtney's partner, watching her process for almost 3 years of this, it's continual. It's still
constant.
Like to rewrite the new story and move away from that imprint. Taking the gifts, so there's gifts in it,
yes,
but then to rebuild it in the way where Courtney is the primary. You've had to process this a lot.
Yeah.
Like, oh, it's starting to happen again. No, wait, I need to. And there's places where you'll play it out where you'll start working a bunch and and then you're like, no, wait, I haven't been with Cedar very much. This needs to change. I need to cancel this and reschedule that. I need to spend more time with my son.
Yeah. Luckily I catch it pretty quick.
Yeah.
And I still spend lots of time with him, but I can notice how easily the field wants to pull me out. And I have to consciously rah! Yeah. I am his mother. I am his primary attachment. And what I imagine is that I'm going to have to offer even more than another mama would have to create that feeling of secure attachment. Which
you've been doing such a great job at.
Yeah. Your field did a good job of choosing a good partner because that's like everything to me. And that's the beauty. And then what's the beauty that Mike is bringing into my field is it was only the mother, only the mother, only the mother. And what he's bringing in is like, whoa, other adults can offer love and care too. Whoa, there can be other nervous systems that bring in resource. And that's something that I feel in Mike's field that's really beautiful and that is a gift to my lineage. Is community support, other people. Yeah. So this is an example of imprints, and this is an example of how strong they are and how they play out and how we can consciously work with them.
I want to circle back, if we can, to yours.
Yeah.
Before we end, because I feel this is an important piece. So with Courtney's imprint that we were touching earlier, where you having feelings is a problem or there's minimizing. What I've also noticed in that place is where, because that was such a consistent experience from where we've talked about this, is your body has expressed that I'm okay. So even when your words are saying, I'm really struggling right now, or I'm just needing someone to hold me, your body shows visually, I'm good. I've got myself. I don't need anything, which was really confusing in the beginning when I knew you, because we would go places and you're like, I really needed you. I really need you to hold me. And I really need reassurance. And I'm like, that is not what it looks like. It looks like you are fine. You're out. So, you're connecting with your friends. You look so happy. You're laughing. I'm really confused. And so I just wanted to bring it back to that piece because, even if inside there's this experience of, oh, I'm this and I'm that, the body could be playing out the story of the imprint
Yeah.
that needs to be known so that we can offer over the new thing. Because I remember after I think maybe 4 or 5 times you saying it, like we'd go to gatherings as an example, and you'd say, I'm really needing reassurance and for you to come in and give me some contact. But your body just looked so fine and capable. I remember it was like, oh, I have to consciously do that, move towards, because I'd say from where I'm sitting, you tell me if it's not true, but your body learned, well, if I'm going to be met with minimizing, deflecting,
Telling me I'm anxious.
telling you that you're
when I have
anxious,
an actual feeling of, I have so many examples, folks, of being in experiences that anybody would have felt anxiety because it wasn't anxiety. It was actually an experience that's stressful. And I was told it's your anxiety.
yeah.
Yeah. So I
And
learned to shut that down.
shut it down
And
in the
literally,
body.
my journey in my life was up until I learned to shut that down. I was constantly being diagnosed with things, told there was something wrong with me. I would spiral in anxiety. And then I remember it, grade 6, I finally learned to shut it down. Don't show. And then that's when I stopped getting bombarded with that. But also now I was just alone
Yeah.
and unreachable.
So glad that you named that, because that's where the nervous system, whether you were conscious of it or not, a lot of people are unconscious. The nervous system just adapts, brings in the coping mechanism, and will shut down a healthy part of the nervous system, the emotional responses to a situation to survive, so that that experience doesn't keep happening.
And so the way that I'm having to work with this now, because I didn't really go into that, is I have to really use my voice to advocate, hey, I know I look fine, but I'm really needing. And the other one is now I'm just starting to learn how to let that part of me that's like anxious or like scared or afraid, like letting someone meet me there. And it's crazy how when you start to open those gates, people will act out your imprint right away. Just know that. It's like the minute you're like, okay, here I go, I'm going to do the new thing, people will act it out. And you have to be like, yep, here it is. Because it's so strong. But as I'm learning how to say, hey, I'm really need, like telling the other person what I need. Like I just had this yesterday and I had to say to Mike, I really need you to hear me and to reassure me and just help me feel through, because I know that there's a truth to what I'm feeling. And I said it like that. I know there's a truth to what I'm feeling. It's not just anxiety. It's not just a feeling. There's truth to what I'm feeling. And then he was really able to meet me. But it's my job to orient him and help him understand and make requests.
And it's my opportunity. It's not my responsibility, but it's my opportunity. And this is the flavor of sacred relationship. I get to be the ally for you to rewrite that story. And knowing this imprint about you and having more understanding of what's needed, when she reached out in a vulnerable place. And what I want to celebrate you in is your body now expresses and shows anxiety or shows a tenderness. And so it's easier to respond to. And so, yay, your body's not shutting it down. And I know that just like your birth field, the thing that place needs is reassurance in your own self-assurance, and then still sharing relationally. What I did yesterday is I'll share my perspective of like, hey, from where I'm sitting, I'm seeing this, or imagine this could be helpful, but what's happening for you? And it's bringing that focus back to what's your wisdom, what's your mama amygdala saying, like what is this situation, what would feel the best for you here?
And I want you all to just orient to this a little bit. Do you see the difference? So, for example, if I get to know my imprint and then Mike plays it out, he does the thing. If I can be like, oh, there's my imprint, it's very different than, oh, Mike. And he did this and he did that and he did, oh, there's my imprint. That was inevitable. Oh, Mike played out my imprint. Very different than Mike, you're an asshole. Mike, what the fuck? Right? Very different. So when we can start to map things out and start to see, and then even say to our partner, hey, you just played out my imprint. Mike's been saying this to me a lot lately. Oh, you're matching my imprint perfectly. That's such a better way of saying it than, Courtney, you keep doing this and you keep doing that. And why are you doing that? Because it's a way that we take responsibility for our material and we can start to bring our partner in as an ally. And so there's two ways we can work with imprints and that will change our relational field. And ideally we want to be doing both. And that's like the epitome of sacred relationship. One is we just start to map and get to know our own imprinting. And you could do that in a relationship and not have your partner doing that, and it would still transform you and your relationship lots. If you just start to work on your own imprinting, get to know your own imprinting, start to bring in what will heal it, what will shift it, what will, work through the emotions, turn towards it in yourself, reach out for help from practitioners, it will transform your relational field. The way people respond to you will change without them even knowing what the imprint is. It'll change. Now, ideally, and the way that we can actually heal our imprints faster is when not only are we mapping and getting to know our imprinting, but we're actually inviting other people in to be allies in that. So we get to know the imprint enough in ourselves that we can start to educate the other person and start to make requests of what would be helpful to have a different experience. So even letting friends know, hey, I have this thing and I'm really needing to be met in this way to rewrite it in a new way. And when we have people that are willing to be allies, then we can actually move through imprints a lot faster. We can heal it in our field a lot faster. And also we can have their help to see our blind spots faster.
Yeah. And it's so enjoyable because that path creates true intimacy. Because really, in order to do what you're describing there, mapping your own imprinting, then vulnerably naming it and orienting your inner circle, your close friends, family, even if that's available, orienting people to what the imprint is vulnerable. It's letting people in, like, hey, this is what happens. Can you help me here? Like, that's vulnerable. And when it's met, it's so enjoyable. It creates a deeper felt sense of, this is my experience, it's created a deeper felt sense of relationship, love, belonging, not feeling so alone inside, feeling a lot more appreciation. Like, wow, I can rely on these people to really help me rewrite this story. Oh my goodness. Like, one of my internal boundaries now is when I choose my inner circle of people, I'm very choosy. I need people who have these skills because I want to continually rewrite my story and I want to help other people do the same. And if somebody isn't signing up for that, I can't invest a lot of time. I don't want to invest a lot of time and energy there because I notice then the imprints just play out unconsciously and it doesn't feel good. I don't feel more well. I don't feel more wholesome and secure. So I really love that you mapped it in that way, because what I found in our relationship is it feels so empowering to build the relational capacity to be an ally and help you rewrite your story, and also to build that relational capacity to lean in vulnerably and say, hey, can you also help me with mine?
That, and then also, this is where from love, we can also start to get curious about our partner's imprinting. And this is important, not from fixing though. It can't be from any kind of fixing. But we can start to be an ally in just noticing and sharing with our partner, with our friends. This is what I notice when I come into your field. There's this interesting thing, this feeling I get in my body. I had a friend and, you know, I'm curious if there was a woman in your field that was really angry. had a lot of rage, because I noticed this thing whenever I'm in your field that I just feel so much rage. And I've been tracking it, and it's like, oh, every time I'm in your field, I just feel this rage. And then I notice other women feel this rage at you too. And just sharing it like that, and then just being curious, was there a woman who is, and that kind of a reflection in a very safe way is so helpful for all of us. Like if somebody can name to me, oh, whenever I'm in your field, I notice this, as long as it's delivered with love and lots of gentleness and curiosity, that is so helpful. It's so much love. And also knowing there's definitely going to be people that don't want you to reflect it. They don't want to go there. They don't want to work on it, and not to waste your time trying to reflect it to those people. I've done that. It's a waste of time. If they're not curious and hungry for it, don't do it. Don't do it.
Yeah, and that's where the spiritual ego can come in as well, just to be mindful of, because when this new awareness comes online, that ego can be like, great, and it can use it as ammunition in relationship, and it can also use it as a place to self-soothe, to want to focus a lot of energy outward and point out everyone else's imprints, but there's a place where it can be an avoidance of dealing with what's inside.
Yeah, it should be like 95% you're tracking your own imprinting, 95%. And then 5% you could be, hey, this is what I notice. But 95% of your attention should be on tracking your own imprint and how to take responsibility for it and how to work on it.
Yeah. And if there is, let's say, an imprint that you're perceiving, if I'm perceiving a pattern in you that's impacting me, that matches my imprint or something, a way that it can be approached is, checking in for consent. Hey, I'm noticing something's coming up for me. I'm having a hard time moving past it. Is it okay that I share a reflection? I'm not saying, this is the key sentence here, I'm not saying any of it is true. This could be all of my own shit. This could be all of my own imprint. I could be making up a story here, but I just feel important. I need to name this. And then can you are you open to that? And, there's so many times where I've done that with you, and then I share like, hey, this is what I'm noticing. And you're like, yeah, there's something I can own there. Yeah, that's totally happening for me. And then it's more relational, and there's consent involved. And it's just really with this intention to help what's going on inside of me. And so that's just an important piece to name. This information isn't to go and start pointing out everyone's stuff.
And in fact, if that's part of your imprint, I would actually say, maybe even make a moratorium of, I'm not going to track the other person's imprinting, and I'm just going to get to know my own, to help create some clarity.
Yeah.
Because we have to actually be pretty seated in our seat to reflect back to other in a good way. And one of the most powerful ways we can actually help the other person have insights is just by sharing our own imprint. It's amazing how I have this imprint that I notice, and this is how it plays out in our relationship. It's amazing how often if we do that, the other person will be like, oh yeah, and then I do da 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 da. Like when you share your own imprinting, then that's the invitation for the other person to start to become curious about their own.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you all for tuning in once again to Together, the podcast where we dive into all of these relational places. We're so grateful for you tuning in. We're grateful to everyone who showed up to the New Human. It was so good seeing you in person. Yeah, so grateful. And please remember that we now have a more recent sponsor, Mindful Meds. And we personally use their product. One of our favorites is Happy Days, and they've got a whole line. There's product in there with psilocybin in there for micro doses. It can really help with rewriting the neural pathways.
And it's mushrooms. It's medicinal mushrooms. So all the way from psychoactive to cordyceps.
Yeah, lion's mane, cordyceps. There's ashwagandha in some of them.
Mm-hmm. And they're beautifully curated to meet you in different ways. And so, if we're talking about relationship, mushrooms are so beautiful because they're such an interconnected being. I almost like plant, but being. I'm going to call it a being. And so it's a cool way of bringing in mushroom consciousness to support reconnection.
Yeah. And because you're a listener, you get this beautiful benefit of 15% off if you use the promo code together. All you got to do is you go to Mindful Meds. It's mindfulmeds.io. And then when you go to your checkout page, just put in the promo code together and you get to put some dollars in your pocket. Thank you all. And until next time.